What's up, everybody? We are back on Clear the Cash. I'm your host, Nate Liss. You can find me on Twitter at @AnOutrageJew. And of course, with me is Jesse Bak. You can find him on Twitter at planet_fatness. And a couple months ago, Jesse had mentioned to me that there was this guy on a totally different social media platform than any of us are really using, because most of us are on Twitter and a lot of stuff on YouTube. And there was this guy on Instagram named Rob that had this incredible collection of cards. He had featured on this podcast, said all these profound things. So naturally, I had to go listen for myself, and Jesse was not wrong. Incredibly impressive interview the first time. And he was gracious enough to jump on with us after Jesse was able to wrangle him in. So Rob, you could find him on Instagram at That's the Old Price. And we rarely use Instagram handles on here, so this is very unique for us. So Rob, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the intro. Happy to be here. I'll let you guys kind of, guide the conversation, and, happy to speak about whatever you want to.
I love it, man. So Jesse kind of put me onto what you were doing in the past, because like a lot of people, I collected cards in the past 20 years ago, 25 years ago with my dad, found myself getting back into the industry of, in the hobby and buying stuff, and just realizing I was kind of playing small ball. And Jesse kind of made me aware of worlds of people that were spending much more money on cards and were keying in on cards that would have longer long-term value and had greater upside. And he's found his kind of path doing this as well. And he's really looked at what you've done and taken a lot from it. He quotes a lot of the stuff that you've done to me. So clearly you're doing some things right. So kind of take us through like how it started for you. Are you like everybody else? I mean, you were in the hobby in the early days and then found your way back in, or did you just never stop?
Yeah, so a bit of both. I remember as a kid, I still have them. But my grandpa used to buy me X-Men cards, which I still think it's like one of the only card segments that like hasn't appreciated somehow. I have all those. And then I remember I played ice hockey growing up, and in middle school, I had some ice hockey cards as well, then kind of stopped. And then it wasn't until I got into college, I actually worked at a card store for about a year. And initially it was just kind of a job, and then I started kind of buying cards and flipping very, very at the infant stages of flipping. So this would have been like, 15 plus, 15, 16 years ago, something like that. And it was really just buying on eBay and then selling on eBay. There was no Instagram or Facebook platform to do anything. You could go to shows. I didn't do any of that. So I did a little bit in school. And then when I graduated school in 2010, I started to buy a little bit bigger cards. So whereas maybe in school I would buy a $200 or $300 card and hope in a year to sell it for $500 or $600. When I started my first job, it was maybe getting close to the 1,000 range, and maybe trying to sell like after more of a performance-driven gain, not like now where you kind of like get something and 3 days later it might have tripled. But I grew up, as we were just talking before the show, a Patriots fan. So I always bought Tom Brady. And for years, I mean, literally for 10 years in the middle of his career, his cards didn't really appreciate, which was odd. It was always Peyton Manning, who had all the kind of, regular season statistics, but wasn't winning, the championships that Brady had. So had a lot of Brady stuff. And then in 2014, I moved to London for work, and London's really expensive if you haven't been there. So I stopped cards. I sold out of a lot of cards, actually. Most of my Tom Brady stuff, which is appreciated quite considerably since 2014. But I kind of use that as a learning lesson. The card market since then is really blown up. I mean, even in the last year, the card market has blown up, whereas maybe last year would be rare to see a $5,000 or $10,000 sale. now you're seeing 50,000 and 100,000 and actually 500,000 and a million now on a regular basis. So the times are changing a bit, but my journey's been, I've been around cards for a long time, I guess, to answer your question, but really got back into it in an aggressive manner probably the last year, really the last 12 months.
Rob, so you mentioned back then you were collecting guys like Tom Brady, or I don't know if you were looking at Peyton or not, but you seem to be pretty present in the moment in terms of like who you were trying to collect. So you were really big into modern players and modern day quarterbacks. But I know since you jumped back into the hobby, you said like a year or two ago, there are some other guys that you're really PCing right now. So can you jump into maybe who you're collecting today?
Yeah, so I would say, if you look through my page, there might be a couple guys that stand out, but as far as where the bulk of the actual investing money goes, like where I really want to hold for, could be 6 months, but could be 6 years, is Mahomes. So I used to basically target all of Brady's rare stuff at, significant discounts to where they are today. I wasn't in cards when Mahomes was a rookie and rode the bench. I wasn't in cards the second year, where he took over from Alex Smith and had the MVP season. So I didn't get the kind of early appreciation that people, price appreciation that people might have had if they bought in at the very beginning, like Prism base cards for $10 or $15 that, now are $10,000 as a PSA 10. But luckily, this time last year, there's been a significant movement in the market, but in Mahomes prices as well. And I did some of the buying, about a year ago, and before. Like now, I mean, it's very difficult to touch the big high end Mahomes cards. So I do still try to add as much Mahomes stuff as I can, but the numbers are just very big from an outlay standpoint. Even if relative value wise, which I think Mahomes is relatively undervalued to basketball players, which I get a lot of times people telling me it's not a valid comparison, but I disagree. I think the gap is going to close sooner than later. And my kind of real prediction that I want to stand by is I think Mahomes will blow past guys like Luka and Giannis at the high end of the market in sub 2 years, regardless of if basketball is international or not. So that said, the other person that I had been buying last summer, and I have a card here with me, wasn't really the same kind of strategy as Mahomes. It's not I don't want to really have this guy's cards for 5 years, maybe not even 5 months. But he's in the same draft class as Mahomes, and that's Mitch Trubisky. So I bought a lot of his stuff for literally pennies on the dollar. So if you look at a PSA 10 base Prism Mahomes card, that's 10 grand. You could pick up a Trubisky exact same card for like $50 right now. So it's not really saying he's ever going to be anywhere near what Mahomes will be on the field or in the card space. But if he's starting somewhere next year, which I think he will be, those cards can go from 50 to 300 to 500 overnight. And the reason I believe this to be true is the other person that I am actually investing in and PCing, I started the beginning of this football season, is Deshaun Watson. And he's also happens to be in that same class. So part of it is it's really easy for me to know what Mahomes card would be. So then I kind of work backwards. So it's like, well, this 10,000 Mahomes card, the Deshaun Watson, literally 2 weeks ago, PSA 10 base Prism rookie, was 500, and now it's 1,000 because there's trade rumors. So there's that kind of stuff. But if I'm starting, if I'm a GM and I'm starting a team based on literally the last 3 years of statistical play, I'm taking Deshaun Watson right behind Mahomes. And the way the card market prices is they're actually going to take Justin Herbert over Deshaun Watson, or they're going to take even Joe Burrow, or they're going to take Kyler Murray, which is fine and it might be right. But I was buying Deshaun Watson cards at half or a third of the price of Kyler Murray. Forget even Mahomes, because maybe he should be so much higher than everyone else. But That's how I got into the Watson space. Trubisky is just like a deep discount play. It's basically a lotto ticket. I didn't put much money in him this summer. I sold a couple of my higher end cards, got the money out, and now I'm just free rolling the rest, and actually still adding because he saved. I think he kind of saved, their season and his chances to start at the end of this year. And just like Deshaun's prices the last few weeks, if you wait for everyone to think that way, then you're going to be paying 5 or 10 times more than what you could pay right now. So
Can I ask? Can I ask you a question then that kind of stems off of this? Because you had mentioned Kyler in there on the podcast that you featured on. You talked about the air quote Mahomes effect, and I'd kind of like to just throw this in here now as we've mentioned a couple of these names like Deshaun and stuff. And you talked about how just because a Mahomes card is valued at $30,000 doesn't mean there's some proportional value to the next most exciting young quarterback next to him. So in Kyler in particular, is he a guy that you're hands off of, or is that somebody that you're interested in purchasing?
So, standalone, I do like Kyler as a player. I think he had a good rookie season, and actually all his entire rookie season, I was kind of buying and selling a lot of his stuff. I ended up moving most of it before this season because once they got DeAndre Hopkins, his stuff kind of doubled overnight. And actually, one of my biggest sales last year was a Kyler Murray National Treasures 1/1 rookie patch autograph card that I literally held for 2. And basically, if I explain the whole story, funded the Mahomes card that you'll see later. But I do like him, and I have to look at the relationship between Deshaun's prices and Kyler's. And again, I'm not looking at these things in isolation. So I'm not just saying, okay, well, Kyler's this, so Deshaun has to be this. What I am saying is if the exact same Deshaun card and Kyler cards are in front of me and I can get Deshaun's card for a third of the price of Kyler Murray's, and Deshaun Watson has been and won a playoff game against Josh Allen and only lost to Mahomes, and Kyler Murray hasn't made the playoffs, and in one more year of a full season would be lucky to have Deshaun Watson's stats because Deshaun's been in the league a year before, I can't really justify buying Kyler Murray if I lay those facts out. That said, I'll probably still get something Kyler Murray in the offseason. I think the time to buy him probably is the next few weeks while everyone's focused on the playoff quarterbacks. He'll definitely get the hype train in the offseason again, and rightfully so. I mean, he's a good quarterback for sure, but it comes down to there's only so much money unless you have an unlimited pool, which I think I've touched on it. Maybe the podcast you guys have heard before. And for me, I have to be careful because if I buy these 2 Kyler cards, then I can't buy these 3 Watsons. And if I buy 2 Kyler cards and 3 Watsons, then I might miss out on a Mahomes. So, at the end of the day, you just got to budget.
Yeah, Rob, I think you're absolutely right on Watson, and I personally, I got to come out and say I took a mini L, although I took a profit on a Watson Prism Silver PSA 10 a couple weeks ago. I did sell in the 500 range, and I've seen it almost double since. So yeah, I mean, honestly, him voicing out his displeasure with Houston's probably the best thing that could have happened with his market, and honestly might be one of the best things that could happen with his career, given, if he can go to somewhere like Miami or another situation with awesome weapons, awesome management, forward-thinking management and coaching. That's honestly probably one of the best things that can happen to him, and I think investing in somebody like Deshaun is a great way to go long term for sure. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I mean, I like Deshaun investment-wise as well because before this recent rise in prices the last couple of weeks, the only time when I talk to people about, thinking about them buying or the reasons they wouldn't buy him was basically, okay, he had good numbers this year, but they didn't win a lot of games. So that's a fact. And then, well, they don't have any draft capital. That's also a fact. Well, they need to get a new head coach. That's true. But all these things I think were baked in. So if you get any any small piece of positive news, it doesn't take much for everyone to get FOMO and just like, like what we've seen the last couple of weeks. So he might not even be traded, but I wasn't really buying him because I thought there might be a trade or I had a crystal ball. He led the league in yards, which is fine. He was playing from behind a lot, but he had a great quarterback rating, and he's been as consistent as you can be the last 3 years, which, his first 3 years in the league. And he's won a playoff game already, which Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield couldn't say till this weekend. And when Lamar Jackson plays Josh Allen this weekend, one of the two has to lose. And when they exit, they'll still only have one win, just like Watson. And those guys are trading at a significant multiple to Deshaun Watson. So,
yeah, agreed. Those are honestly awesome points. One thing that we wanted to get into, probably one of the more interesting things that I heard about during your interview with Brett on Stacking Slabs was your philosophy on overpaying for cards, or overpaying for low serial numbered cards or one of ones. That just kind of like I was talking about this with Nate pre-show, and if there's a card that you bought for, I don't know, $1,000 or something, and you 3x or 5x on it at some point in time, and you and the seller were kind of nickel and diming each other over like $50 or $100, and if you make a profit, you don't really care about that $50. Like, you even think back, like, why the hell was I nickel and diming this guy for a half hour, or why was the seller nickel and diming me for a half hour? So I just thought this is, this philosophy on even overpaying for rare cards. It's just something that kind of piqued my interest, and probably something I should be doing more often myself. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on overpaying something that you think can sharply appreciate.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that rarity principle. So if you're buying the PSA 10 Deshaun Watson at $500 from a couple weeks ago, you don't want to be the guy that pays $700 and then the next one goes right back to $500, because then something is a little off there. So that's not really the way to go. But when you're talking about either a low serial numbered card, a one of one, I think is the clearest cut example to talk about, because you can look at comps, you can check previous sales, of that card, but once the owner has the card, all of that is thrown out the window. And even if there's this, imaginary relationship between what a gold numbered to 10 card should be versus a 1 out of 1, and then so a base goes for X, so the multiple should be 20X for a 1 out of 1. When it's a rare card and one that's not replaceable, you have to use some kind of, not logic, but some common sense behind it. Because if you miss it for $50 or $5,000 or whatever it is, and that literally in 2 months, or maybe not 2 months, might take a year, but if the player pans out, that thing is a lotto ticket and everybody's going to want it, then you're probably going to regret that down the road. I've had a couple cards in the last 3 weeks that I kind of did that with, had counter offers come my way. I kind of nickeled and dimed it a bit and lost both of them. And this Deshaun Watson that I'll show in a bit, I had a chance to buy it this weekend for $8,500 was the counter offer that I got from the seller, and I was trying to get it for less. I ended up paying $10,500 30 minutes later, because someone came in with a $10,000 offer. And the only reason I'm sharing this is, like, I knew once that card got away, I would never see it until it was $50,000 or $100,000 or whatever it may be, or just literally not for sale. So that was, I won't say a learning experience, because I was beating myself up from doing the same thing a couple times as well in the last few weeks. But you have to be fluid, or just, be willing to walk away. I mean, at the end of the day, the reason I was kind of offering lower is I just, bought a lot of stuff, and I ended up having to kind of sell some stuff right after to get the funding. But I took a smaller amount than I would have had I not landed this card, so I could land it on some after the fact sales. So I think that in and of itself told me that I would have been pretty bummed had I not made this happen.
I think people are probably shocked to hear that a card was purchased for $10,500 and 30 minutes later you're paying $2,500 more than the original opportunity to do so. That's crazy. A guy did come in and you didn't want to lose it. When you talk about rarity, like what do you define as rarity? We know one of one. Are you talking about low pop count? Are you talking about particular types of inserts? Like what to you makes it a rare version?
Yeah, so there's really three buckets of rarity. I have 3 cards with me. There's 2 categories are represented here, and then there's one missing. So one of one is the clearest cut. It's the only card that exists. If you want it, you got to pay for it. If the seller is being unreasonable, you either have to meet that demand or just come to terms that you're not going to own it. So that's very clear cut. The second one is low pop stuff. That's the one I don't have with me, but like a BGS 10 black label. Those are just very rare in general. A lot of times people like to look at like the PSA 10 pop report, which are rare as well, but a BGS 10 black label is, I mean, I would be hard pressed to say there's even 500 of those that exist in the entire world across every single card category there is. And I actually sold one of those recently, and no offers come in for a while, kind of like a 1 out of 1. And then you don't need 5,000 people or the market like you would with like a PSA 10 base or a silver card to get on board. You need one person to meet you where you want. And similar to that is the kind of third one where some people put a premium on it. They say it should be 2x. Some people say it should be 3x. Kind of goes back to the 1 out of 1 point though, and that's the jersey number card. So I have a Trubisky jersey number rookie, 10 out of 10. This card was not $10,500. It was $250 this summer. But it has big upside if he ever kind of puts it together. So, I mean, those are really the 3 areas that I try to focus on. Mahomes is a bit of the exception because his rare stuff is so just from an absolute cash outlay standpoint out there compared to, a lot of other football players. So sometimes you have to kind of get things that don't fit those buckets, but those are really the 3 buckets that I like to operate in because I don't like having to be constrained by comps and having basically, every time someone asks you what the price is and you quote it, then they say, well, can you do this? And then you say no. And then they basically look up something and screenshot it and send you something from 4 months ago of like a similar, like, well, you can send me this exact card of what I bought it for, but it's irrelevant now, like, because I have the only one. That's not even being rude about it. That's just how I like to insulate, price drops. If I'm right about the player, which you're not always right about, but, if you're right about the player, you want to be in the vehicle that you aren't, giving your stuff away down the road. You want to be, in stuff that's going to hopefully not only appreciate at least as fast as the more maybe liquid or readily available stuff, but more insulated to price drops. An example of that was a Deshaun Watson card. His market kind of tanked at the beginning of the season, the first few weeks, because they were losing games. And there was a really strong PSA 10 gold comp that I was tracking, like way more from a relative value to some of his other Prism stuff, way higher than it should have sold for. And the reason that sold is it was probably a pop 1 or 2, and someone wanted that card, and that was their only chance. And they're like, okay, well, if I believe in Deshaun Watson long term, then I'm happy to buy this card now, because if I don't and he pans out the way I think he will, I'll be paying 10 times this amount. So that's how I kind of go about it.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a wide array of what makes cards rare, and people have the feeling, like you're saying with Trubisky. I think Chicago played well enough towards the end of the year here. Who knows if he ends up back in Chicago? I'm sure Chicago fans are like, please God, no, don't re-sign Trubisky. I don't want to go through this 3-4 more years of like obscurity and not getting by. And he was decent for a good part of the year here. So there is a lot of sort of betting on players. But when you look at advanced metrics, and there's two ways I'm talking about it here. One is metrics when we look at the sales of cards. We look at trends, we look at price histories, we look at comps per se, which are irrelevant at one-for-ones for the most part, like you've said. The other version is player advanced metrics. So a buddy of ours, actually the network owner of this, he owns playerprofiler.com. I don't know if it's a website you've ever heard of in your life, but you could punch in any football player's name you want. You can see every advanced metric from athleticism to performance to everything to identify the same trends. And we kind of use these tools in fantasy football to help us identify what players have the best opportunity to erupt game to game or, ascend to the top of their roster. So do you use do metrics come into play for you at all? Or is a lot of this sort of feel and just years and years of experience buying and selling?
I would say advanced metrics, probably not, but metrics. And when I say that, so if you look at the different ways to view sports or to be engaged in sports, you can watch sports, just watch them. You can bet on sports. You can play fantasy football, and then you can buy sports cards. And I watch a lot of sports, do a little bit of betting, been playing fantasy football for a while. And fantasy football kind of preparation or research for a roster or drafting before the season, that does trickle over into the card space a bit. I think you guys had asked if I collect skill position players. Very, very rarely, very, very sparsely. Because outside of quarterbacks, I think for longevity of sustainable prices, the player has to really be like top 5 at the position. And running backs, almost like Christian McCaffrey had, kind of really held value coming into the year, and he still has, all things considered, but he played like 2 games this year. And running backs, just like in fantasy football, they're a dime a dozen, unfortunately. I mean, they'll win you the ship, and then the next year they'll get hurt the first game of the season. I actually trickle that philosophy into investing in quarterbacks. So a quarterback relies on his legs, not if a quarterback can run. Mahomes can run. Aaron Rodgers, I guess when he was a little younger, he could run. But guys that are running 15, 20 times a game, like a Lamar Jackson, that's why I haven't held a lot of his cards. And I don't necessarily think he's a bad player or a bad investment. But if you look at which players go down the most, it's running backs. And what are they doing to get hit wrong? It's running the ball. I mean, you could get hurt in any position. But when you're talking about pumping a big chunk of money into a player and they potentially go down week 2, then you're, unless they're towards the end of their career and very accomplished, you're looking at that either very illiquid or like down 50, 60%, scenario in a short period of time. There was a bit of that fantasy football skill position type hype coming into the season. I think it was magnified by the way Russell Wilson started out with DK Metcalf this year. So it almost like solidified the DK Metcalf story. And by the end of the season, you realize DK Metcalf is a physical freak and he's really good at playing football, but he's on a like efficiency driven team where, he's not going to probably put up Calvin Johnson numbers where they were literally just Matt Stafford was closing his eyes and throwing the ball up. So going back to the metrics point, yes, I read kind of Roto World and, set my roster every week. But because I focus my fantasy team around like just drafting the right quarterback, and I invest in a couple quarterbacks here and there, I don't look at it as much as someone who is, buying bulking base cards of wide receivers and running backs, which there's a lot of money and opportunity in, but it's just not really my area of focus.
It makes total sense. I know that the running back position, Jesse and I have talked about this too. We've looked back we do a lot of NBA talk on this show too, like you brought up earlier, and you just look at how much NBA players, their cards are worth, just base Prism cards of guys that are rookies or have really not even done that much in the league yet versus a Christian McCaffrey Prism Silver we were looking at the other day, like shockingly low. I mean, you would think it would be a lot more, but as you've said, I mean, a running back's lifespan, like their relevance in fantasy football, a top 10 running back is what, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years max. And then they're kind of gone, where in your case, Patrick Mahomes, he's going to be playing football 10 years from now, or 8 years from now. We're going to be watching him play at a high level consistently. And that card is just going to continue to go up in value, and any titles that are won in Kansas City are going to certainly be heavily attributed to Patrick Mahomes, his arm, his decision-making. There's going to be moments at every game where he makes some insane throw or scrambles for those 8 yards they needed on third down, and they got in a range for that field goal to win the game. And all these memories are going to be associated with it, where those running backs just don't seem like they just don't carry some of those same values. And so they feel like a flip to me. Maybe like if you want to invest in skill position, is it more of a flip, or is it just not really worth the money whatsoever?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, you can flip anything, right? It's all about your entry point. So if you buy the right, you buy Christian McCaffrey, now, right? And he has 2 big games to start next year, you're probably making money. I mean, as long as he takes the football field again, you probably make money if you buy it today. I think in season, I'd still probably rather be in a quarterback that may or may not pan out, where you kind of got to worry about if they're going to do good or not, as opposed to, the running back could have 1,000 yards after 6 games and then they get hurt. And if you didn't sell right before they get hurt and they missed a year, it's like 10 months of nothing until the hype builds for the next year. So if I do buy running back or wide receivers, it's exclusively it's either 1 out of 1s, like almost exclusively, or like really rare cards, like number to 10 or less, something like that. And for a discount, like if an auction ends like lower, like for example, I don't know what McCaffrey's like PSA 10 base or silvers are doing, but I had bought his rare Prism color blue, which is like print run under 10 at some point this season for not much more than what his base PSA 10s do. And then I ended up selling it for, I think, double what I paid, because I was able to kind of argue, well, this card in relation to his own silver, it's a million times rare, and there's only like pop 3 or something versus hundreds or 1,000. So but again, that's one-offs for me, really.
Yeah, Rob, I kind of just wanted to go back to your point and maybe acknowledge to some of the viewers that, yeah, I mean, for sure, Lamar Jackson might be a hot name right now. We actually did talk about him last week, and I figured if the Ravens were eliminated from the playoffs, that he might actually, we could probably see a more substantial dip than we've already seen in his prices throughout the course of the season. So, yeah, I mean, and definitely in the short term, he's probably an interesting investment piece. But if you're looking at somebody who takes a lot of their game is based on running the ball, so like 20 times a game, 25 times a game or something, like look what happened to RG3. So like he was like the hottest thing coming out of football in 2010 or whatever year he came out, 2011, 2012, and then you can probably find his PSA 10 tops chrome in like the dollar bin. So I mean, it's possible. Like I'm a huge fan of like mobile quarterbacks, right. But people have to acknowledge that there is a risk in these guys going down or having like a career altering injury or career ending injury. So take that into account when you invest in somebody like a running back or like a super mobile quarterback. If it's somebody like Lamar Jackson. We talked about a couple of quarterbacks that are pretty relevant right now in the league, in terms of who you're looking to target and who you're looking to collect and invest in. So outside of maybe somebody like Mahomes or Trubisky or Watson? Is there any other quarterback that you're targeting now, or maybe even a quarterback that you were interested in when you were a kid, or just like any all-time great type of players that you look to PC or just have saved in your save search list on eBay?
Yeah, I mean, I think I try not to go. So when I got back into cards, whatever, a year and a half ago, the first guy that I was buying was Peyton Manning, because when I looked back, a bit depressed at what some of the Tom Brady stuff was doing, I looked at Peyton stuff that actually used to trade at a significant multiple to Brady, and now it was the other way around. So I was buying some Peyton, and his stuff's taken off quite a bit with the Hall of Fame thing kicking off, I think in August. But Peyton was a guy. I mean, I'll still occasionally, I do my searches less. So I'll search Mahomes, I'll search Watson, but I do my searches less now around like 10 different quarterbacks. I'll do them around like cards. So I'll search like 1 out of 1. I'll search BGS Black Label. And then if it crosses into, like, I bought a Peyton Manning Prism BGS 10 Black Label, I think from like 2013, for like nothing. But I saw it quickly because I was searching not Peyton Manning and siphoning through all of his stuff. And it wasn't a rookie, but I was searching Black Label, and it happened to be Peyton Manning. And I bought like some rare Brady Prism Gold cards by searching Prism Gold, and then, finding the Brady. I don't regularly search just Brady Prism Gold. So as far as the young guys go, I do like Burrow, and his prices have kind of dipped. I mean, he does seem like a guy who wins. The unfortunate thing is he had a bad injury very early, which it's one that he's fully expected to recover from, but still it was an injury early where, he missed a whole year. And he's definitely cheaper than what he would have been, but he's by no means cheap. He's definitely more expensive than Deshaun Watson. And we've kind of already, went over that one. Herbert looked really good, but then he's even, rightfully so, but pricier than Burrow, which means he's even furtherly more expensive than Deshaun Watson. Then the other thing with him is he's in Mahomes' division. So whereas Burrow might be on a team that doesn't really win, and they've got the Ravens, the Steelers will probably still kind of be something, even if Ben moves on, because the coaching is good and the defense is good. It looks like the Browns have kind of finally put it together. So, like, what is Burrow's, not this year, he won't really be judged on making the playoffs, but eventually that's what separates the guys like Mahomes and Brady, to guys like Matt Ryan or Matt Stafford, in the mid to long run. And, and Herbert, maybe he limps into the wild card, but it's shaping up like the Chiefs are going to be the Patriots, for the next 10 or 15 years, basically dominating that division.
God have mercy.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's just my my view. I mean, and then if I look into the next year's draft, I know there's going to be like Zion level hype around Trevor Lawrence, but the Jags are historically not that good, and it could change with the right quarterback. I mean, at the end of the day, that's, to me, the biggest, thing in football is the quarterback position. If you have the right one, you always have a chance. But, Herbert, Burrow, and then, in the future, Trevor Lawrence, those prices just aren't cheap enough to want to buy their stuff over either ponying up a bit more for Mahomes or getting Watson at a discount. And I think because, and this goes back to one of the points we were talking about earlier, because Mahomes cards have like kind of pushed the bar up on what football can do, people are shelling out big money for Herbert stuff because they know what the equivalent Mahomes card is, and they think, well, maybe Herbert could get there, where this price is 90% less than Mahomes, but it still might be like 20 or 30 grand, like, not 200 or 300. So I try to insulate myself there too. Cause if Herbert comes out and wins 5 or 6 games next year, maybe that's okay. But if he wins 6 or 7 or 8 the next year and, no playoffs, people are going to be on to the next thing. That said, I did buy my first Herbert and relatively big Herbert today. So it's not like I don't like the kid, but you have to pick your spots. I think in today's market, it's a rare one. It fits the criteria. But if I'm holding it in 2 years and he's still not, really winning, I'll probably lose money.
So here's a question for you. As a diehard Seahawks fan, the Seahawks recently, they let Skybox Shoddy go. So Brian Schottenheimer is gone. That era is over. Pete Carroll is committed to wanting to establish the run once again. Russell Wilson spoke out recently and was kind of like, it sounds like he wants to intervene. He would like to have more explosive plays, more balance to this offense, at least more throwing attempts, because we know Russell Wilson's arm is great. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league in terms of the advanced metrics and accuracy and all these things. And you brought it up with DK Metcalf, right? This pairing is incredible. With a guy like that, though, knowing that there's a chance that he remains a guy that stays outside the top 15, top 20 in pass attempts annually in this offense in Seattle, while a guy like Mahomes is, top 3 in pass attempts annually. Does that change anything for you? I mean, how much would you invest in Russell Wilson? He's a guy that I want to buy. He's a guy that Jesse and I have talked about a little bit, but the more I'm listening to you and you're sort of talking about sort of perception almost more than numbers in a sense. Numbers are obviously at play, but when we talk about guys missed the playoffs or didn't make the playoffs, guys that had rings or didn't have rings, guys that are culturally relevant or not, this is all sort of perception based. So knowing that Russell Wilson is going to be a guy that may never blow the barn doors off, with a 50 touchdown season, unless he has the 14.3% touchdown rate that he had earlier in the year, which clearly took a nosedive, it's going to be hard for him to ever do that. So where are you at with a guy like Russell Wilson?
Russell Wilson is a really tricky one, like definitely an anomaly. So one, he got the ring early on, and he is a winner. I mean, they're always right there. So Russell Wilson is definitely a guy that if I dug into it a bit more, I probably would own some of his stuff. I mean, as far as, having something negative to say about him, I wouldn't have anything outside of just the offense that he's in, which you brought up, which is definitely a factor. But at the end of the day, it's about, I think, winning and championships are bigger than just stats. Because if you look at just stats, you could have a guy like a Matt Ryan or a Stafford who have 4,000-yard seasons every year, but 7 and 9 consistently. And Russell Wilson's usually, more of a 10-win plus kind of guy. That said, it was almost like the perfect storm this summer. So the card market, as everyone knows, has ballooned the last 9 months or whatever. The work from home, the people re-entering the hobby, and Russell Wilson. So like from a Prism rookie standpoint, 2012 is his rookie year, and that's first year Prism. So there all of a sudden was this attention around first year Prism. So like that bubbled up in and of itself. And the key rookie and key quarterback in 2012 Prism happens to be Russell Wilson. Then separately from that, you had people, I think, looking at Russell Wilson's like, a winner, and maybe thinking that DK Metcalf would have like a good follow on to his rookie year, which he did. That caused some hype, and I think maybe they were looking at like a Russell Wilson relative value, maybe to like a Mahomes or to like a Kyler Murray or whatever, and saying like, wow, his PSA 10 card, the base, Topps, Chrome, or Prism is really cheap. I heard basically everyone on Instagram this summer was saying that Russell Wilson was undervalued. I didn't buy any. And he probably was, compared to like what some of these rookies are doing. He was probably the one guy that was selling for less than like Deshaun Watson, which he probably should be selling for more. And then his start to the season was like the first 4 games was like all these people that like were were kind of not pumping him up, but basically saying like, wow, the math doesn't make sense. His card should be higher. He's done a lot. Like he's not just a flash in the pan. He's been doing a lot for 8 or 9 years or whatever. His stuff was like, it went through the roof the first month of the season. And then there's always this recency bias where probably like he probably stopped passing by like week 6 and 7 or 8 or whatever, but all people could remember were these like freakish games with 5 touchdowns and whatever, big stats games for like a DK Metcalf. And DK Metcalf stuff, I think, popped a ton from like the start of the season to like week 4 or 5. And then by the end of the season, like I don't know when the kind of thought switched from the beginning of the year, the hot start, to like the middle of the season. It probably stayed flat, but then all of a sudden it's like kind of limping into the playoffs. Lost, I think it was to the Giants, maybe. Definitely a worser team than they were. And I think like if you bought week 3 or 4 and you're holding now, you probably got crushed. If you bought this time last year or this summer, you're probably still up. So again, I think it's all about entry point. I think Russell Wilson's a guy that if I was going to put big money into him personally, I would be doing it with like a long-term view. Like he'll definitely play, or I think he'll play another 8 to 10 years. He'll definitely go to the Hall of Fame unless something freakish happens. Good chance as anyone to win another Super Bowl. And if he doesn't, he at least has one, which is the same amount as Drew Brees and it's the same amount as Aaron Rodgers. So definitely a bit of an anomaly. I just right now, I don't know if I personally see the entry point based on his stuff still probably a lot higher than this time last year, but definitely down from like the first few weeks of the season without pulling up any numbers.
It makes me physically ill because this was career high in pass attempts and he only averaged 24 pass attempts a game. I mean, Mahomes was at 39. He was almost throwing the ball 40 times a game. And if there's any chance they go back to a more run heavy offense, it's just like, it makes me so damn sad. And so I'm like, I want to put money in on Russell Wilson, and you've convinced me a lot. And Jesse's been kind of preaching the same thing, like just invest in winners, the same way that you're talking about Watson. You just feel like his trajectory is much like Russell Wilson's. He's unfortunately had an organization that was awful around him for a long time, and they've really been throttling his upside. But he truly is, a top 5, 6 guy in this league and should be invested in pretty heavily. Can I ask you, you said that you brought some stuff with you tonight. Can we take a look at some of the stuff you've got and hear some of the backstories on these things? Because, this is some of the stuff Jesse's been telling me about, and I'm just as excited to see what you've got here as probably anybody else is.
Yeah, so I'll start with the value play first. This one's the 2017 Prism Gold. Can you guys see it?
Nice, yeah.
Trubisky, jersey number 10 out of 10. So I bought this card this summer literally for $250. I don't know what the base cards were doing at this time, but I would guess still probably 40 or 50. But I think I bought it after they didn't even announce Foles as a starter. But once they got Foles, the market just assumed that Foles was going to be the guy. And part of me starting to buy Trubisky, it wasn't until I didn't own any Trubisky last year at all, luckily, because I'd be down. But when they got Foles, it was more of Foles stinks, number one. Like he strung it together to win a Super Bowl in a small sample size. Joe Flacco did the same thing, but he's not a starter because he got outplayed and benched for Gardner Minshew last year, and he is always hurt. So I'm not really afraid of that guy coming in to displace, a top 10 draft pick from only a couple years ago, who's only a season removed from the Pro Bowl. Yes, he has terrible throws, probably 1 or 2 terrible throws a game, but a lot of quarterbacks that have been in the league for a long time do that, if not more. Think of like a Matt Ryan and a Stafford, which again, as I've alluded to, this probably aren't guys you want to park your money in long term, but at his price levels, I couldn't say no. And this card, the non-jersey number version of this card, sold a week and a half ago for $1,500, and even just using a
Wow.
2x multiple. This I think has a shot even after getting bumped from the postseason at like 3K. So potential 10x in 7-8 months with like a 250 cost base. Like I'll take that. I don't care who it is. Like, I mean, that is why I bought this card, not really for any other reason. And when I bought Trubisky this summer, I bought two types of cards. I bought very rare cards like this at significant discounts to like what really any other player would go for, and like what the all-time high would have been for this card. And then I also bought, I think, like 15 PSA 10 base prisms in like the 30, 40, 50 range, because those are super liquid. If the market does come around, those will go from 40 or 50 to like 3 or 4 or 500 and have super high ROI, just because the average person that's looking for that player will probably search for that card first. So I did a bit of a mix, and I sold off a couple of the rare ones, and now I'm free rolling the rest. And if he never plays another game, it's okay. But I do think, based on the quarterback play across the league this year, he'll be starting week 1 somewhere next year. So that's that card. Anything on that, or should I go to the next one?
So we talked about it when he told me that you were a big Mahomes buyer and PC collector. I was like, well, I mean, that makes sense, right? Mahomes is transcendent at a young age, and we believe that he could win 4, 5, 6 Super Bowls, which means Russell Wilson probably never wins another one, but that's fine. So that's number one. But then he goes, and you'll never believe who else he's PCing. And I'm like, well, who? Is it Deshaun? Is it Rodgers? And he's like, no, it's Trubisky. Yeah. And I'm like, Trubisky? It kind of shocked me, but I get now why that it's a value play. And if you go to your IG page, again, that's the old price for people that want to check this out. You have so many rare Trubisky cards. I mean, how many Trubiskys do you own? Like a variety, different kinds.
I think I have like, I was just looking at it with the playoff run, something like probably 50 PSA 10 or 9.5 cards, and only like 15 of those are base. So like in the 30 range of like very rare cards. So I have a flawless number to 5 9.5 card of Trubisky that I paid, like, it was one of the higher ones, like $500 for the summer. The Mahomes card sold a month ago, the exact same card, for $180K. So I mean, just the fact that if Trubisky is even playing a little bit next year and the Mahomes cards continue to push up, I don't think it should carry Trubisky anywhere near Mahomes' price. But there might be one or two people that see that, I think, kind of like myself, and they're like, well, the Mahomes at 180K, this thing's sitting on eBay for 2K. I'll pay that, or whatever it may be. I sold probably the biggest sale I had was 2 weeks ago, a PSA 10 red prism. I paid like $300 for it in August. It was one of the higher priced ones, but it was when he was announced starter, so the train had already started moving prices up. I sold it for $1,500. So like, I'll do that all day long if I can. Low cost base, low risk. Worst case, I just end up with a box of Trubisky's, but one or two sales and then you free roll in the operation. So that's how I got into that. I can move on to the Watson. This actually came today. I was staring out the window all day waiting for FedEx. So
I saw the IG post.
I was going to say, I saw the IG story with the skeleton waiting as the FedEx guys outside.
Yeah. So this is the 2017 select field level black 1/1 Deshaun Watson stamped on the back. This was the card that popped up on eBay last Saturday, so five days ago. I saw it. I searched a lot of times 1/1 by newly listed, so I saw it relatively quickly to when it appeared on eBay. Started throwing in offers. First was getting declines, then was getting counters. Long story short, I ended up turning down a counter offer, and then not even an hour later paying $2,000 more for the card, because I realized I made a mistake, and if I didn't get it now, someone else was going to get it, and that was going to be it. This card, I think, has massive upside, and not like double your money upside. I think actually I probably could double my money on it today and get out of it instantly for double what I paid. This is one of those that has like 10 to 15x in a year and a half to 2 years. Put it like this: if Deshaun wins a playoff game, this card will be 10 to 15x what I paid, and that could be in less than a year in theory. So this one I'll probably hang on for a while. His market has moved pretty significantly, and it's really interesting when the markets move. The higher the market is for a player, so the more people that are in, the higher the value of the cards like Mahomes. The relationships of like what things should sell for are pretty well defined and more efficient. It's almost like in the stock market. If you look at big cap stocks, they sell for like in a tighter range, and it seems like there's a tighter consensus of like what something should sell for compared to its historical price and then also to its peers. If you look at a guy like Trubisky, you might actually be able, and I did this literally 2 weeks ago when I sold the Red Prism. I sold a Red Prism PSA 10 for $1,500, and the same day I spent, I think, $450 to add a BGS 9 3-color National Treasures RPA. If you went into I basically got a National Treasures card for a third of the price of a Red Prism. If you just throw the grades out, it would be at minimum 3x the other way for Mahomes. So if you sold a PSA 10 Red Prism, it would be at least 3 times that to get a nice 3-color National Treasures. So the market's not efficient. And I think in the Deshaun space, it's probably closer to the Trubisky inefficiencies than to the Mahomes space. So I really wanted to get one card that I could hold and not really worry about comps or like if people are high on him or he doesn't get traded or he does. But if everything comes together, I think this card has massive upside. So now I'm selling some of the things that I bought kind of through the season at probably way lower prices than what I'll get for them today, that I think have good, short and long-term potential, but to free up room kind of after the fact for this one, because this one ticks all the boxes for like my investing thesis, or things that I look for, both from the player, but also the rarity, and no one will be able to comp this card, when I go to sell it.
Yeah. And I don't know if you mentioned this. What was the cost of that card when it was all said and done?
So if I was a smart person, it would have been $8,500, but since me, it was $10,500.
But like Jesse said earlier, right? Like maybe that $50 that you're fighting with the seller over, maybe the $2,500 is a good gap, but if that card's worth 10x, 15x in the future, that $2,500 is probably out of sight, out of mind completely. I mean, I can't imagine if that card goes to $100,000 value, I don't think you're going to be sweating that $2,500 in the future.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly right. And that's why I ended up just, it was one of those ones too, where, so I sent an offer, I got a counter. I countered back actually, obviously below where the seller had offered it. And then I was waiting because it was like back and forth, and then it was like crickets. And I was waiting, and then, 5 minutes later, I was like, hey, actually, I can do 500 more. And then like 3 minutes later, I'm like, actually, I could do 500 more, then that 500 more. And then I got to a point where I messaged the guy, like, this is all within 10 minutes. And I'm like, so he's probably just like laughing. And I'm like, hey, I can pay you what you asked for. And then I'm like refreshing. the card comes down from eBay, and I'm like, oh, I did it again. Like, I'm like, this is so dumb. So then I messaged the guy a couple times. I'm like, hey, if for whatever reason the buyer flakes, or I'll pay now. And nothing. And then he finally messaged me back. He's like, yeah, I was like, hey, did this sell? He's like, yeah, I got a really high offer on Instagram. And then I was like, oh, let me see if I can find him. I found him on Instagram. I messaged him, just saying like, hey, just got your message. He's like, yeah. He's like, he's like, the price now is, so he offered 8,500. He said the price now is 9,500. I'm like, well, I'll do, because I saw I was an account that had like, enough followers to feel comfortable. I was like, I'll do, 9,500 friends and family. Like, I don't know what your other thing was. And then he sends me a screenshot that someone offered 10. And I'm like, well, I'll offer 10.5, but like, are we going to like keep doing this all day? Or like, can I just lock it up? Like, yeah, he's like, if you do 10.5, that's a good price. So I locked it up, but I mean, I truly think this card today is worth double that, just based on loose piecing together some relative value comps in the Deshaun space. I think the Mahomes version of that card is well into the six figures as well, which again doesn't mean that this is there or should be there or will go there, but it's at least a good frame of reference because it's the exact same draft class and the exact same card in theory.
I know.
Was that
go ahead, Jesse.
I was just gonna say, was that a select black 1 of 1 or a prism black 1 of 1?
Yeah, so this is the select. It's weird. It's select field level, but they call it a prism black. But
right.
The brand. The brand is select. And this is one, and this is why I don't totally buy into the argument that either basketball should be much higher than football, or basketball and football shouldn't be compared to each other, because the equivalent of this card in basketball is select. It's not called, I don't think it's called field level. I think it's courtside. And it looks, it looks the same. It's like this distressed, the little squares. And those cards have taken off a lot recently, just in general. And it's spilling over into football. So that's another one where, like, if you're going to compare sometimes and then not the other, like, that's where I don't fully get it. If you're going to compare the actual stock of the card and the brand, then you have to at some point compare the players, or like where the bar is for the players. So like when I look at Mahomes, I don't look at Kyler Murray and I don't look at Deshaun. I look at Luka and Zion, and Giannis to a lesser extent, because he's a bit further in his career, and see where those cards could go. So that's that one. And then it brings us to the last one. This is a card that I hope I have for a long time. I've showed it a few times, on Instagram. This card was a function of a big trade that I did in April, right before things really took off. This is kind of another reason I went after the Deshaun as hard as I could, because I know it's not the exact same card, but it's similar. And the exact same card of the one I'm about to show you of Deshaun, I know where that is, and it's buried, and I'm not getting that for anywhere near what I paid for the other one. So this is, to me, going to be, I think, potentially a top 10 football card of all time. So in my view, it's Mahomes' second best rookie behind the National Treasure's 1 out of 1 NFL Shield. But it certainly is the best version of his most recognizable rookie card that exists, and it's the 2017 Black Prism 1 out of 1.
This is coming. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the 1 of 1 there. This card is, I think where people would peg it at is less than my kind of rough valuation or estimate would be. But there's been a few good data points in the last particularly in the last month, and another good one that's about to come out, but in the basketball space. So the a similar card of Giannis sold publicly a month or so ago for 1.1 million, and it's not apples to apples to this card because it was called Black Mosaic, but it's from the Prism set. But then there's what they call like the true Black 1 of 1 from the same set, which I think the average consensus would be like a 2x multiple on the Mosaic. So like, let's just say roughly 2 million. In football in 2017, there's only one 1 of 1, and it's the black finite. So it's closer to or more the equivalent to the 2 million, the extrapolated or roughly estimated 2 million Giannis than the 1.1. What will be really helpful to see at some point is the Luka Doncic black 1/1 Prism, or the Nebula, which again in that set there's the 1/1 black Prism and then the Nebula, which was I think from an international pack. Both I think hold around similar-ish values, maybe more of a preference thing. That said, there is a Luka Gold, which is basically the next best thing to the black 1/1 that's at Golden Auctions now. As of midday today, only a couple days in, it's a PSA 10. It's at around 280K. I think that card potentially could do 750 outside shot at $1 million. And then again, you can't put a scientific multiple of the relationship between a gold Prism, like number to 10, and a 1/1. But let's just say, because we don't have a crystal ball, let's make a guess that the Luka does even just 500, which I think it will blow past that because it's already at 280 and a lot of bidding occurs at the end. If we use a roughly 5x multiple to that, that's 2.5 million. Let's say Luka does 750. That's more like 3.54. That's the kind of card that I'm comparing this Mahomes to. And maybe we're not there yet as a overall market in saying that the top of the football market should be equivalent to the top of the basketball market. But if I'm thinking about the careers of Mahomes versus a Luka or like a Zion, I'm putting my money into Mahomes every single time over those guys because they'll both kind of be lucky. From what I understand, I'm not a huge basketball person, but they'll both be lucky to crack even like the top 10 of like all the elite, Mount Rushmore type guys. You got LeBron, Kobe, Jordan. And then you probably have 5 or 10 guys that are just as, really good in the league at any one time as those guys. And then you kind of think about Mahomes is basically just chasing Brady. And since he's become the starter, he didn't win the MVP last year. He might not win it again this year because of Rodgers, but he's going to be basically the runner-up every year in the MVP, and he's going to be, or the MVP, and he's going to be just like Brady, basically punch ticket to the AFC Championship almost every year for the next 10 or 15 years. And, it might take 5 or 10 years for people to realize that, that is an interesting avenue to kind of put your money in versus some of the bigger, maybe basketball or baseball cards. Because when I compare Mahomes to a basketball player, I basically think he's a combination of LeBron James because he's going to dominate the league for like that amount of time. He doesn't have the same tenure as LeBron, but basically since getting in the league, he's kind of always going to be the best or one of the best players throughout his entire career. But then he also has the kind of Luka comparison in that he's kind of only a couple of years in and everyone thinks he's going to be real good. So it's kind of like combining those two players into one. And if he backs that up with not just the statistics, but the championships, I mean, I think the only person that will be the bar for him in the football space is going to be Brady. And when you look at cross sport into basketball, I think he's eventually going to pace Giannis, Luka, Trae Young, Ja, all these guys that are really good and probably will be really good, but they'll kind of cancel each other out the next, decade or whatever. While Mahomes, I think, will sit on a pedestal by himself, especially when Breeze, Brady, Rodgers, Phillip Rivers, these guys are going to disappear in the next few years from the league. So
I think that's an interesting point too. When you look at, there are a cluster of great NBA players, and the bar statistically is set so high. I mean, the greatest of great players in the NBA, even guys like Karl Malone that are way up there have scoring records and all these things that are going to be tough to achieve, where it is entirely possible as guys are playing later into their career at the quarterback position, especially, that Patrick Mahomes locks up every record imaginable, from passing yards to touchdowns to, Super Bowl rings. My God, how many more is he going to play in? So it's amazing to think that you're holding on to a card that you believe is the second best Mahomes card anybody could possibly get their hands on. How did you even acquire this card? I mean, most of us, Jesse talks about he has to make trades, sell things to work his way up. If you're thinking that this card is what it is, I imagine this took a lot to achieve.
Yeah, so this one was just really lucky timing. So I had mentioned earlier in the show, I had bought some Peyton Manning cards when I got back into collecting. So I had two of his pretty big rookie cards that I couldn't really give away. They weren't very liquid in like where I kind of value them versus where, maybe the offers were coming in, but they were very low pop. And maybe one of them would surface on eBay a year. So there was really no relevant comps, but I was able to move those at a decent clip towards the Mahomes. I had a big Kyler Murray flip, a National Treasures 1/1 that I held for 2 days and made a large chunk on, like a pretty significant outlay, and I've 3x'd it in 2 days. So the card came in 2 days sold. But I knew that when I was buying it, kind of like the Deshaun, I knew that it was too cheap. Like I knew that I didn't know it, I thought it was going to be more of like a hold for 6 months or hold for a year, and then I would triple or double, and I did it in 2 days. So I reinvested that money back into some Mahomes stuff kind of the day after. And this was all like right before everything exploded in March. So I coupled the kind of inventory I already had, like some Peyton Manning stuff, and then these kind of newly acquired Mahomes cards into a consolidation effort to get this big 1/1. And the only way it worked was just one, really lucky timing. And then two, the person who bought this card publicly from on eBay from PWCC this time last year, or right after he won the Super Bowl, that person basically got the card in and paid it off, had it a couple weeks, and then that was when I started making my way towards it after I saw it on eBay. And that person, really nice guy, MC Sports Cards on Instagram. He's a sports card dealer. So I'm sure he's had hundreds or thousands of cards that have turned out kind of like this card that have appreciated a lot. But I think in his specific case, he has to keep things moving. So he got good value because I saw what the old price was. I saw what he paid for it on eBay when he won it in auction. And I paid, more than that, obviously. And he was able to use his network, I think, to make a good clip on the stuff that I gave him. I obviously wasn't trading him junk to get a card like this. So it kind of worked out for both parties. But had this card been purchased by someone like myself the first time around, I would have never seen it again. So I really had no idea that I would ever even have a chance at this card. and and kind of here we are. So,
and just because for me, this is like somebody watching some like top level NBA players shooting, and I'm sitting courtside, and I'm sure the listeners are curious too. What did you end up spending on that particular card?
So the card auctioned for, I think, 70 grand in last February, which would have been a ton. I mean, it's a ton of money now, but it would have been a ton of money like pre card explosion. It would have been like probably up there with one of the highest priced football cards of the last couple of years on eBay, I'd imagine, outside of like maybe a Tom Brady high end rookie. And then I think maybe less than 2 months after that, we kind of pegged a trade value around 110, but my cash portion was only 10, which was all I had. I have a very limited pool of money with a lot of kind of invested. So, like I said, it was just a freakish situation to be able to find not only someone that I could get it from, but put a little bit more in trade towards it. Like if the guy would have said, "Hey, I need at least half cash," it would have been just literally impossible. Because you can't even at that point you can't even sell stuff even at a discount to like fix that gap, or like I didn't have the inventory or the network at the time to do that. So very lucky. I'm glad I didn't move it. I think at this point now I've kind of built up a portfolio that I can sell. I have other pretty good cards, or like not as good as this, but certainly some other big ones. I'll look to kind of sell those into the market before this one goes. And it eventually will go because I don't have any emotional attachment to it, but I just see it as a very clear cut investment vehicle for like a player that I believe in heavily. And I'd rather get stuff that, I may or may not be able to get back, as opposed to this, once it goes, it's never coming back.
Right. So Jesse, where is your head at right now? Because I feel like you and I are going to have this conversation in like 10 years. Like you're going to say, look, I couldn't help myself, Nate. I found this card that was so incredible and I went after it. And it was 60 grand, 80 grand. Like, where are you at in this conversation?
I mean, honestly, if you find something and if you have the means of getting the funds somehow, or if you have those funds in inventory, it's, if it's something that you got to have, especially if it's a one of one, and if it's for somebody as iconic and dominant in a sport like football as Mahomes is, you got to do whatever you can to try to acquire it, because there's not going to be a lot of those chances that are going to come. So this honestly, this kind of inspires me to at least put the one of one saved search under my eBay saved search, just to kind of keep these cards in mind. And it's awesome to hear that you got it from MC Sports Cards. I've bought plenty of cards from him in the past, whether it be on eBay. Yeah, that's really cool. And these dealers, like you said, they're in a position where they do this as a living. They can't hold on to something for for super long without potentially taking a loss or having less inventory come in over time. So yeah, like you said, it was right time, right place. It's absolutely insane how you only had to actually pony up $10,000 for a card that you guys valued at 110,000 at the time of the deal. So that part really blows my mind, and it kind of like gets my creative juices flowing in terms of incorporating trades into really high money card purchases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
I was gonna say, I think getting creative sometimes, you don't know. If you don't ask, you won't know, right? Maybe 99 people would have said, no, only looking for cash only, or like at least half cash or whatever. And I kind of stumbled into the one person that would hear me out on moving inventory. So, I definitely think if you're going after something that you'll never see again, trying to get creative, or maybe pushing outside of your budget or your comfort zone, if you not overextending yourself completely, but, maybe acquiring the card and then selling stuff even at a slight discount to where you would if you could hold it forever, just to like get the funds back in. Because if you've made the right decision, usually I think you'll be happy with it, like you said, not nickel and diming, whether it's real dollars, like paying a little bit more, or, fluff dollars because you sold a little bit earlier than you wanted to on something else.
So you've been at this a long time, and Jesse and I talk about the same topic on some podcasts. You've got guys like Gary Vee, you've got changes at PSA, you've got all these, all this hype around cards right now. There's a lot of momentum. Bigger companies are investing in cards. You're seeing it become a part of like almost portfolios in a sense. Is that what gives you the confidence in the card market itself, like going forward in terms of longevity? Because a lot of people that don't believe in this, that aren't into buying cards, they're saying, hey, here we go again. This is a fad. This thing's going to come and go just like we've seen it do in the past. So kind of what's your response to that? At least what do you think the future of cards is?
So I mean, it's definitely interesting. What I would say now, with the numbers that we're seeing and the new records that are rolling in on the high end part of the market, it seems like it's here to stay. I mean, if you look at a more traditional market or a more widely understood one, like, the equity space, the stock market, in a recession or, a global crisis, all companies, even good ones, will go down. But at some point, money comes back in and props it back up because people take a view that, this used to be this price, now it's here. The fundamentals haven't changed. There's enough, investors, in the card, in parallel to the card market, there's enough people that believe in this player or that PC this player or whatever. Like Tom Brady, if people, maybe give up on cards a bit or the card market takes a hit, Tom Brady still has 6 rings, maybe 7 after this playoff run. Someone's going to come in, I think, and prop it up. I mean, the overproduction thing that almost killed it in the 90s, that's gone. And then, if I look at the segment that I like to operate in myself, it's largely rare stuff, anyways. So if the market kind of takes a beating and maybe the overpopulated or the base cards or the silver PSA 10s, fall 50%, maybe the Prism Golds only fall 10 or 20%. So I think the market's here to stay. I think the numbers are just too big. There's too much money out there, whether you're a collector or investor or both. There's talks of funds. There's fractional shares being, companies are buying cards and divvying out shares for fractional ownership. I just don't see it changing now. And some people do it as an actual hobby or a side thing, and some people are doing it as a source of living. So I can't see it disappearing completely, or really even, there might be a pullback because there's pullbacks in every market, but it seems like there's just so much attention and new money coming in that even if some leaves, it should be able to sustain that.
So
that's really true. Yeah, I just wanted to say, as soon as I was really following the NBA bubble very closely. Like, I'm a healthcare worker. I haven't been having to work from home all the time. I am going into working in a hospital, so I'm not going completely insane at home. But there are other things I want to watch that aren't the news when I get home. So a lot of that was the bubble during the first wave, or as the first wave was kind of winding down, and I noticed that some card prices like Zion's prices were super inflated going into the bubble, and from the time that after that initial drop in card prices once the country was shut down, or once the world was shut down. So as soon as Zion and the Pelicans, as soon as they were eliminated from playoff contention, you saw his prices start to plummet, and you would see that more, like he was almost kind of dictating the market. Like even as somebody like basically people like players outside of Luka and maybe guys that hit game winners like Lillard or guys that put up like 60 plus points in a game in the bubble. Besides those guys, like a lot of them, that market started to dip just because of somebody like Zion and so many people holding, you know, Zion base prisms or Zion prism silvers and so many like base prism and prism silvers in the NBA. So, but the crazy thing is like what you said about rare and serial numbered cards is there's only a select few that hold those cards. So you might see a huge dip in somebody like a Zion or a Luka once they're eliminated. But even if it's like a Luka out of 10 or a Luka 1 of 1 or a Zion 1 of 1, those cards have actually continued to appreciate with time, regardless of how the rest of the market's doing. So I think that's an awesome point that you made about maybe holding on to more rare stuff as soon as you can get your hands on it, like assuming you have the funds for it. One question I had for you actually that because I've seen your Instagram, I've seen your collection. It's absurd. Like I'll scroll through it every so often, and I'll just find like something crazy that's new like every day. I just wanted to kind of get your idea on like what's your goal? What would you say your end goal is in the hobby? Like I know like you basically said to basically get the black finite Mahomes 1 of 1, you had to do a lot of consolidating. You had to move a lot of inventory and even cash. So I don't know if consolidating is kind of like part of your end goal or if it's, you know, owning as many 1 of 1 Jalen Hurts cards as possible. Like what exactly would you say is your goal in the hobby?
I think for me now, consolidation was a lot in 2020 for me. So I moved into a space that, I mean, this time last year I would have said I really had no business being in, and still kind of look back and wonder how, you know, some of the bigger cards that I've acquired I got to. A lot of it's just been kind of timing. You know, so if I think about my strategy, it's to keep as many of those bigger cards as I can for as long as I can. But at the end of the day, as the numbers continue to, you know, hopefully push up for not just my stuff, but the market, stuff's going to have to go. So it's really just being disciplined around, you know, it's okay to sell stuff, try and sell kind of from the bottom or middle first before you sell at the top. And then if I'm going to be holding, you know, my top 4 or 5 Mahomes cards, maybe this Deshaun Watson makes its way into like a not for sale for like a while, but I can't get every single card like the Jalen Hurts kaboom and say I'm going to hold it for a year or 2 years or 3 years. I got the card. I held it for 3 weeks or 4 weeks and I 6x'd it, you know, and maybe I could have 10x'd it if he's in the Pro Bowl next year or leads the team to the playoffs, but there's a chance he could fizzle out like Drew Lock next year. And then not only did I miss out, you know, on the money that I could have now, but getting that money in hand now, I can probably grow that to triple what the Hertz could have done standalone. So you got to keep stuff moving. You can't hold everything. You know, at some point you do have to sell something, especially if the numbers are there. I know a few guys that have been very big in the Mahomes space, and even though we all think his stuff's going up, they've monetized and sold a couple big cards, and then they've had that money to find opportunities to buy similar-ish cards at a discount when someone else wants to sell and maybe selling for slightly less or less than what they were able to sell their stuff at. So I'm kind of fluid with my selling or consolidation strategy, but I think as long as I buy the stuff that I've kind of, you know, what we talked about today, the rare stuff, the other, you know, the timing thing isn't as big of an issue unless it's purely like a, you know, you're buying a rookie to kind of like flip it and it doesn't matter if they pan out or not. But when you're talking about like taking a view, it's less of a factor.
Mm. Well, Rob, I mean, we've run through a lot of questions, and I kind of feel like it feels like it's at a good point. Like, I don't know that I want to rehash any new stuff because it feels like such a crescendo. So short of Jesse having a question for you, Jesse, feel free if you've got something that's been on your mind. I know that, again, this is somebody you've been wanting to get on the podcast. Otherwise, man, I think we'll work on our way out on this thing.
Yeah, Rob, honestly, this was like, there's a reason that we wanted you on as the first guest of the show. I saw, like, as soon as you put up that Hertz Kaboom 1 of 1, as soon as I saw your Mahomes Black Finite 1 of 1, I knew we need to get a big, high end collector, especially, with us being under the Roto Underworld Radio Network now. We're primarily football based and fantasy football based, but we want to incorporate more sports in here as much as possible. But, football is probably the best start, honestly, for us with our audience. So we loved having you on, and I can't wait to see what your collection has, moving forward. And hopefully maybe we can work a deal ourselves one day.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. We'll have to do it again. And certainly, as you guys have any questions or card stuff, like you know where to find me. Happy to help or bounce ideas off or whatever it may be.
I love it, man. It's very rare in any space, for that matter, to find people that are willing to be transparent about investments, money, what they're doing. It's very cool to have somebody come on and kind of say, hey, this is how I did it. This is what it costs to do it, and kind of put it out there for people. Because again, like Jesse and I mentioned, I think many of our buyers are probably in the early stages of, hey, I have only so much to invest. How do I ever get to a level like this guy Rob is at right now? And it sounds like anybody else, you worked your way up and put yourself in a position where once you had some capital, once you had some equity in cards and other things, you said, look, I believe in this card that I'm going to invest in, and you pushed your chips in. And I think anybody can do that if they have the confidence and they work their way up. So just hearing you kind of lay out your story is probably going to be helpful for a lot of people. I mean, you hear Jesse right now, he's jacked up. He's probably going to go buy a crazy card when we end this podcast. So it's great to get you on, man. Thank you for the transparency. Thank you for the time. And again, if anybody wants to find you, they can find you on Instagram at That's the Old Price. You don't have a Twitter or anything, right?
No, yeah, just Insta for now.
Absolutely amazing. I didn't even know that was a thing. That's so incredible. I don't use my Instagram, so we're like the inverse of one another. So I do understand completely, man. So I appreciate the time. I know Jesse appreciates the time. And hopefully one of these days when the show gets bigger and bigger, we can bring you back on and see where you're at in your life at that point.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, Rob. You too.
Thanks.